Okay, so now we're going to talk about dimensioning, and I've got CAD pulled up, and I've also got the instructions for the set up a template, and you're going to probably need an English template. Don't think we have any metric drawings for this semester. The only thing that you would change is you would just have to change all of your dimensions to metric instead of English. Like 0.125, you wouldn't want that to be 0.125 millimeter. You would want to change it to the equivalent, which would be approximately equal to 1/8 of an inch. But anyway, I wanted to set this one up so you could start it from scratch. So you could start a brand new drawing, or you could either just pull up your layers and you could skip step 2 altogether. So if you remember, setting up your layers, you go to the layer dialog box, and I don't know why I've got 2 object layers, but anyway, you'd want to also add a hidden layer and a center line and a viewport. And so I added 3 layers here, and I can just go to that first one and right click, rename, and I can call that one hidden. And I'm going to go ahead and rename all of them, and right click, rename. I can make that one center line, and then right click, rename, and then that one is viewport. So then try to use different colors for everyone, because you start identifying a layer with a color. Let's see, I haven't used that one yet. And then, of course, my hidden line type, I have to load that and look for that in alphabetical order. Look for hidden, okay, and then choose hidden to use. And then for center line, right click, not color, sorry. Right click on my, single left click on my line type and load and look for center. Just choose the first one. And then choose it now to use it. So those are all my layers. So I've got my layers set up, and then step 3 takes us through, let's see, no, step 3. Multi-line text. So draw text, multi-line text, make a text box, and then brings that up. First thing I want to do is I want to change this to 0.125, or you can type in 1/8 of an inch, 1/8, and hit enter, and it changes it. And if I type my name in, then this template, and click OK, will always have my name, and I can double click and change it to whatever I needed it to be. Let's see, sometimes we had fillets, 1/8 inch fillets, typical, but we'd already have our text size for our multi-line text. So I'm just going to do that, leave my name on there. And then next it tells us to start with our dimension dialog box. So I'm going to go to dimension style. And then under here we got a dialog box that kind of reminds us of some we've seen in a couple other places. It allows us to create a new one, or we can just modify our existing one. So to begin with, you're probably going to have annotated and standard. Annotated is something new that AutoCAD developed a few years ago. I don't find it to be very user-friendly, so I like to use the standard dimension style. And so I'm just going to modify that one for my English template. So I click on modify, and I'm going to look at each one of these tabs individually and talk about those as we're setting this up for our standard template. Color, I usually suggest, and this is dimension line color, I usually suggest that you change at least one color. It can be your dimension line color, extension line color, or text color. I usually like to change my text color But this way I can recognize my standard dimension style as a particular color. And, you know, that also reinforces that I'm using my layer template, because I'll see the correct color for my dimension style as well as my layers. So it's just kind of a, falls along the lines of everything else in AutoCAD, that colors you associate with certain things you're trying to do. So you can see right now it calls it by block. Baseline spacing, we're going to leave that alone. We do not want to suppress our dimension lines, but you know, if we click anything in here, we can see in our window what that would look like, so that looks kind of odd. Extension lines, we're not going to change anything about our extension lines. We're definitely not going to suppress anything. Extend beyond dim lines. This is actually the only thing that we're changing on this whole page. So that should be 1/8 of an inch, 1/8. If I hit enter, it changes it to a decimal. The offset from origin is correct, and that's this little gap here between our object and our extension lines and where that started. Symbols and arrows, you can see we've got arrowheads, closed fill. If we use this drop box, we can see we've got a variety. There's no need to change these to any of these. We're just going to use the closed fill for all of those. The arrow size is correct at 0.18. The center mark, I'm going to show you what happens if I click none. If you look over here, I've got a center mark where the circle is. And we've got a radius over here called out for that, because the center of this radius and the center of that hole are the same in this particular situation. If I click on none, then you can see that that doesn't show up. Click on mark, and then it's back again. So I'm going to leave that with the default. And everything else on here is correct. Dimension break, arc length symbol, jog angle if we need one. We'll talk about jog later. I'm going to go to the next tab, and that's text. And remember, I mentioned that I like to change a color just to help me recognize. And this way, every time I see yellow text, I know that I'm in my English template and that I'm using my standard dimension style. Text type, this is supposed to be 1/8 of an inch. This is a national standard that all text on your drawing appears 1/8 of an inch. Text placement, we're going to leave that the same, and you can see that anytime you've got a drop down, you got an opportunity to change it. But like I said, we're going to leave it center, and we're not going to change anything else on here. We're going to use horizontal text alignment for this class. You can see that all of your text is horizontal. I find it's a little, in my opinion, it's just a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to click on fit. Usually I don't mess with this at all unless I have to change the scale, which we're going to talk about later what that means. Right now, as long as we're using a viewport scale of 1:1, then our use overall scale of 1 is going to be correct. It was only when we change that from 1:1 to something else that we'd have to change our fit. Primary units. Unit format is decimal. You can see the way that looks. If for some reason we needed to change to architectural, you can see that adds the inches, and if we had anything drawn in a foot, we would change that too. Then it also changed to precision when we changed that to architectural. I'm going to change it back to decimal. The precision is 4 decimal places. So look at your drawing and see what is your largest or your longest number. You know, how many decimal places after the decimal do you need? So if you only need 3, then change that to 3, and then it makes your dimension a little bit shorter. Not going to mess with anything up here. We're going to leave our scale factor there. Zero suppression. That really doesn't apply. Well, yes, it does. Here's your radius has got the 0 in front. If you don't like that, I can click on leading the 0. And what that will do, it'll take the 0 out, because the 0 to the left at the decimal place, if there's no other digit to the left, it really doesn't need that extra 0. That's the only thing I changed on this sheet, and that's not really listed on my list of instructions, because it's just kind of one of those things about whether or not you like it to use it or not. Our angular dimensions are rounded off to the whole number. We're not going to use alternate units right now, but if we did, you can see all this is grayed out now. If we left click on it, then would start showing two types of dimensions there for each dimension. One is English and the other one is metric. It's assumed that your second dimension is metric. If it's not, you could change that. But I'm going to uncheck it because I don't need it. Tolerances, we're not going to use those yet, but we will talk about those later when we start using tolerances. So let's look again at our list, and here you go. So we'd already set up our layers. I do see one thing I forgot to do is set up my viewport layer, do not plot. I changed the colors as I wanted or left them alone. Extend beyond dim line, I changed that. Offset from origin, actually this one is already set on 0.0625, so we don't even have to worry about that at all. In our text tab, we changed our text to an 8, and I changed the color. Okay, format leaders, that's one thing we did not do. So let me cancel out of that. We changed that. We didn't change anything here. Under text, we changed that to 1/8 of an inch. And we didn't change anything else except, you know, whatever we wanted to change, or about, like if we want to change the 0 or what. But that's something that you can change later after you see it. So I'm going to go to Format, Multi-Line Text. I'm sorry, Multi-Leader Style. Now this is when we use a leader, and we're going to leave it on standard, and we're going to go to modify. And if you look at the different tabs for this, you can see that arrowheads are already set. And also here's a break, 1/8 of an inch between your horizontal bar here and your text. I'm going to leave that the same. Leader structure, we're going to leave all of these settings the same. Even we're going to leave the 1:1, as long as our viewport scale is 1:1, that's going to be correct. We'll go to content. This should be 1/8 of an inch, just like your text in your dimension style. And I'm going to change the color to be the same color as what I'm using for the dimension style as well. So I can click OK and close. And now when I get ready to dimension something, then you can see I've got 3 decimal places. I've got my text is 1/8 of an inch. It's yellow, you know, so I can still recognize that as what I need it to be. If I needed to create another dimension style, then I could go to my dimension style box, and I could create a new one.